and welcome to Grouchy Geeks episode 18. My name's Scott, and joining me as always, it's Steve.
Hello, good evening, and welcome.
How's it going?
All right, yes, it's autumn now. The nights are drawing in a bit. It's dark when I wake up, which I don't like. Getting up in the dark is not good.
Yeah, I keep looking outside and thinking, I need to make sure I've got de-icer for the car and a scraper and all that sort of stuff. Because at the moment I don't, and any day now, I'm going to get caught out. So I need to sort that out as soon as possible, I think.
Yes, for sure. Is it worth doing a update on exercise?
Yeah, not for me. I've been really bad. I need to. I've got plans, but I'm not there yet. But you can lord it over me at how you can tell me about your 9-pack and.
I wish. No, I've been a bit rubbish the last couple of weeks. I haven't ran in 2 weeks, but I've been doing some other exercise and bits and pieces, but not the same level. Mm-hmm. I mean, where I run in the mornings, there's no street lighting, so I don't fancy the idea of running in the dark. So I need to kind of change my route or change the time that I run, and that's just going to be a bit of adjustment. But I've been a bit lax as well. I've been away for a few days, but that's just an excuse too. So we need to do better by next month. That's what we said.
Keep us honest, listeners.
Yes, that's right. Right. So, any news this month?
Yeah, a few things. It's like you were saying before we came online. It's the run up to New York Comic Con, and so things are a little bit quiet. I've seen a few things. One thing that's kind of sort of slightly bizarre, but kind of interesting. I don't know if you've seen this, but Channel 4 have announced that they're going to potentially start doing a TV series of V for Vendetta. I don't know if you've heard this.
I saw this. I've got mixed feelings about this. What about you?
It seems a strange thing to do as a TV series. Like we've talked lots of times about TV can often be better, and there's been things that have been announced as movies, and we've said, I wish I did it on TV instead, so that they could explore the characters and flesh it out a little bit. But actually, V for Vendetta is a completely self-contained thing that works quite well as a movie.
Yes.
So it seems like a really strange thing to do, particularly because the main character V is, there's not a whole lot of depth there, if you know what I mean. Like it's quite a, it seems like a really strange decision. I can't help thinking it's we might get into this when we start talking about Discovery in a bit, but doing politically motivated shows kind of seems to be the flavour of the month slightly, with things like Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. And I wonder whether they've looked at V for Vendetta and think, well, this is a really politically motivated kind of a concept. So this is something that's topical rather than thinking, this is a good idea for a TV show.
Yeah, I was going to say The Handmaid's Tale for sure. And there's also that problem of, so with The Handmaid's Tale, I don't know if you've watched the first season.
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, so it's not a spoiler to say that there's material in the TV show that's not in the book because they've got more space and because they want the TV show to run for potentially as many series as possible. Now, unlike other shows where they don't plan the end, there is a definitive ending for The Handmaid's Tale, which I would think they'll try and land as close as they can. But in the story, it all takes place from one person's point of view. So in the TV show, you can do all sorts of cool things. You can go, well, what was happening with this guy over here that we didn't hear about? And, that kind of stuff is interesting. So my feeling is for V for Vendetta, they'll attempt to do something the same. They might show more backstory from someone else and then flash back to the present. They might do just other side characters and bring them in and do some more world building. But as you say, it does seem very timely that they're doing it, going, that's a great political thing. But there again, there has to be a definitive end because we know what the ending is. So I think it could only run for a maximum of 3 or 4 seasons, but just watch them. If it works, they'll stretch it to 5.
Yeah, for sure.
Depends how many episodes it is, because Channel 4 doesn't do the full American 22. So is it 6? Is it 8? Then, how far to go about it after that?
Yeah, well, season 1 of Dark Mirror, which was originally a Channel 4 show, was 3 episodes. So, then they're certainly not afraid to do shorter run things. It's an interesting idea. It's just, I don't think it's a bad idea. I just think it's a strange one, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So, I think Handmaid's Tale was originally on Hulu, wasn't it, in America?
Yes.
So, speaking of Hulu, they're developing a new show based upon a Marvel comic. Now, that doesn't sound like big news in itself. It's happening a lot these days with Marvel and DC. But the actual property that they're developing is quite interesting. Now, it was a title originally started by one of our favourite writers, Brian K. Vaughan. Mm-hmm. And this is the book called Runaways. Do you remember this at all?
It rings a bell, yeah. We haven't talked about it in a while, have we?
It's been a long time. So he created it from scratch, I believe, where there's a bunch of kids. I think there's 10 or even 12 of them. And they all discover, it's not a spoiler really, because this is something that the kids find out in the first few minutes of the show. But essentially they find out that all of their parents are part of a secret organization known as the Pride, and they all like wear robes and go to weird rituals, and they don't really think much of it at first until they realize that their parents are essentially villains.
Awesome.
So they don't put on spandex and run around, fighting Spider-Man and stuff, but they're like Lex Luthor level evil scientists, and I think one's like an evil he can do magic, another one's into technology. It's mother and father for each of them, but they're all a bit weird, and they've all got slightly different specialities, and the kids are obviously chips off the old block in some ways, and they find out what their parents do, and they run away, and then it's them trying to come to terms with it, trying to work out who they really are. And there's a trailer that's just come out for the new series of Runaways, which will start, I think, later this year, or possibly even... there you go. It premieres on Hulu on November the 21st this year.
Yeah, so right around the corner, only just a month away.
Yeah, very close. So it looks really interesting.
Yeah, it looks cool. I've just I've looked at a couple of screenshots of it, and they've done quite a good job of making the actors look like the characters in the comic as well.
Yeah, they're matching them very well, and they're quite racially diverse. The characters were originally, and I'm glad to see they've stuck to that with the TV show. So that'll be an interesting one to watch, because it's not your typical superhero kind of story. Yeah,
not at all. Yeah, that'll be interesting. And again, I quite... we've talked about Netflix many times in the past, but the fact that it's going to be purely online potentially gives them license to do things that they can't normally do on broadcast TV.
Yeah, so we'll see what Hulu does.
Yeah, so on a not very topical note, as well. Okay, so to give you and Pete a plug, if you're not listening to it, everybody should listen to Bags of Action. But I noticed in your last episode you talked about Kingsman: The Secret Service.
Yes.
And last night I went to see the sequel, which is The Golden Circle. I don't know if you've seen it.
Not yet, no. So how was it?
Oh, it's good.
Okay.
It's really, really, really good. When the original Kingsman came out, there was just something about the trailers and the posters and things like that completely turned me off. I had no interest in seeing it whatsoever. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh no, it's really good. You should watch it." And I watched it and thought it was amazing. And I think the sequel is even better.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Julianne Moore is brilliant in it. There's a few fantastic cameos. The beginning it jumps around a lot when it's sort of establishing things, but kind of half an hour in, once it really gets going, it's amazing. They just kind of it's just more of the same, but even more over the top than the previous one. I mean, it's just fantastically well done. To me, Barry will kill me for saying this, but to me, it's the new James Bond.
No, he's all right. He'll be all right with that. Right. If you said it's new Indiana Jones, he wouldn't forgive you. But yeah, okay. Well, I definitely do want to get to see it, but I'm not sure if I'll manage it at the cinema. I think the next film I'm going to see will have to be Blade Runner.
I've got tickets.
Right. Okay. So this time, next month when we talk, you will have seen it.
Definitely, yeah. So it's in just over a week. I've got tickets to go and see it. So I haven't been spoilt. I haven't watched too much about it, but I've heard only good things about it. So yeah, I'm crazy excited.
Good. I should see it, I think, before next month as well, so we can chat about that a bit.
Yeah, well, maybe we can talk about. I don't think we've talked much about the original, so we can talk about the original and the sequel and how it holds up.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's good. Look at us planning ahead.
Oh boy, we'll end up doing something completely different now.
Probably, yeah. Another bit of comic book news from me, actually. Now, many times over the 10 years that we've been podcasting, we've talked about Vertigo comic book series like Sweet Tooth, and I'm sure we've mentioned other things like Sandman and Scalped and so on. DC have announced that in August next year, to coincide with the 25th anniversary of Vertigo, they're going to relaunch the imprint.
Oh, interesting. So, have you got any news on what's going to be coming out?
Not really. So, it was started in 1993 by Karen Berger, and she worked with some of the biggest creators then and still now, people like Neil Gaiman and Morrison and all this kind of stuff, Garth Ennis and so on. But it doesn't sort of say what's next. It just says that they're going to relaunch it. I don't want to say that it's declined since Berger left, but it's definitely changed in the last 10 years or so, that's for sure, even when she was still there, I would say. So she stepped down in 2012, and Shelley Bond did very well after her with people like Fables, which continued for a number of years, Why the Last Man, that kind of thing. But, there was a lot of restructuring, apparently, around the imprint, and they moved characters in and out of Vertigo, which was annoying. So originally, John Constantine was only at Vertigo, and DC wanted that back in the main fold, so he came back in, and that series had to end, and they had to restart it as a more, almost like a PG version of Constantine. So I don't know. It seemed to kind of go through a number of metamorphoses over the years. But next year, it's going to be the relaunch, and hopefully it'll go back to its roots and be a mature reader's imprint.
Yeah, interesting. It'd be cool to see what's happening.
Yeah, a lot of this news is coming out of New York Comic Con, which was just last weekend. So more stuff for next year to watch out for. Yeah,
for sure. So on the subject of, on a slightly more downbeat note, you're talking about things starting. I'm talking about things coming to an end. So right. One of my favourite horror films of all time is The Mist, mostly because of the ending. But what I hadn't managed to get around to watching was the TV show The Mist. And now I'm beginning to wonder whether I should ever get around to it, because it's been canned Firefly style, let's say.
Right.
So I don't think it was anywhere near. I've not watched it. I don't think it was anywhere near as good as Firefly. But I just mean in terms of they've shot a certain number of episodes.
Yeah.
And the owners have just turned around and said, let's just not bother, shall we? and they've basically canned it. So they're not giving them time to wrap up any of the threads, resolve any of the mysteries. They're just saying, I don't think we're going to bother anymore. So that's it. So if you've been watching it, and if you have been watching it, there hasn't been very many of you, which is why they're canning it. So it's something that I was planning to get around to, but given that nothing's going to get resolved, I'm kind of not so sure anymore.
Yeah, if they at least air the ones that they've done, that would be helpful. But if they're not even going to do that, that's disappointing.
It's slightly bizarre because it kind of feels like, these things potentially have a life beyond TV now, in the sense that, a home for this could be, it could sit for years on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. But where it could be potentially be making money by people going out and choosing to watch it. But then, it's, if people know the story in that it was just canned unceremoniously without wrapping up any loose ends, then it's it almost feels like it's going to reduce their income over the long term, because it's like, we might as well just do a couple of relatively cheap episodes to wrap up a few, a few of the loose ends, make it a satisfying ending, and then people are more likely to watch it, in the long term on DVD or Blu-ray or Netflix or something like that. But if they just go, just forget it, then it's not. It seems a bit short-sighted to me, even if it wasn't a very good show.
Yeah, it just seems like a waste of money. Like, if you've got a complete package, as you say, you can then sell that as a unit, and make back some of the money. Surely over time, you'll get some money from the different platforms that are now available. So yeah, it's just, I also don't get it when they do 17 pilots, and then they may only move forward with a couple of them. But surely you could then have a section where you could actually just go and watch shows that never actually went anywhere, and some people would still want to be watch the pilot and go, that's interesting, and just out of curiosity see what was chosen, what wasn't, and they don't do anything with it, and they just kind of spend millions of dollars on a pilot and then just go, yeah, not that one, and shit can it. And it's like, right, no, you spent all that time, the actors and everybody, the crew and writers, and nothing, nope, sets gone, dead. It's like, right, it does seem very, very bizarre. But equally, someone else could then watch that and go, we quite like that. Maybe we'll pick that up. There's so many platforms now and opportunities now, and say, right, let's do 6 episodes and see what happens. They've already done the pilot. We don't need to redo it. Air it, see what happens. So it's very strange now. I think TV models are going to have to change even more going forward. And I think the 22-24 season thing should die. I actually think it's too long now. I think people haven't got the time or the patience that they used to.
And it's very, very difficult not to pad as well, right?
Yes.
If you've got that much amount of stuff to do. Whereas, in stuff that's sort of 10, 12, 13 episodes, it can be really tightly plotted. So it's interesting, but it's like you say, the standard TV model is you'll produce a bunch of pilots, and then the vast majority of them will get a sort of put in a wooden crate and stick in the warehouse next to the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Ark.
It is true.
But it's nice what Amazon do with their pilot season, where it's like, we'll produce a bunch of pilots, we'll put them on the internet for everybody to watch, and then we'll just let the viewers decide which ones deserve a season.
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to do it, to be honest.
Well, at least then you're not second guessing what it is people want. You've got hard facts to back up, whether we're going to produce show A or show B.
Yeah, and Top Cow have done it for years with comics, where they have the pilot season, the same thing. They produce 6 or 10 comics, first issues. People then vote, and 1 or 2. The one that gets the most interest then gets made into a short series, and if it goes well, they continue with those series. So, anyway, right. Another bit of TV/comic book news, actually. Now, this one, I think it's a good idea, but I don't really know how it's going to work. So, you obviously know who Ryan Talbot is, the British comic book artist and writer. Do you remember his comic book Granville, the anthropomorphic one about the Scotland Yard badger, who's a cop investigating stuff?
Yes, I do. We way back in the day, I think we spoke about this, didn't we?
Now, this book is beautiful. It is absolutely amazing. The art is gorgeous. The colours are fantastic. And it's populated in a world by lots of animals, in clothes, anthropomorphic, but occasionally there are doe people in the background who are actually the humans, which is hilarious. But there's not many of them, and the main character, as I said, is this Archie LeBrock, who's a detective inspector. Now they're talking about doing this as a TV series.
Wow, that's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, a live-action TV series, not even an anime. Yeah, see, that's my point. Not even an animated TV series. Like, if you'd done, I don't know, some sort of animation, then that would work. But how on earth would you do it with people without just doing, awful masks, or everyone's got a CGI head, or they said it's intended to be a mixture of live action with CGI for animals and other effects. But I don't really. Surely it's cost prohibitive.
It sounds absolutely crazy, doesn't it? I mean, it's so difficult to effectively animate somebody, and it's hard enough to have an animated character in a movie that has an absolutely massive budget for like an hour and a half. If you're producing, 10 or 15 hours worth of TV show and your main character is animated in amongst live action, that's, unless they've stumbled across an amazing way of doing it, then that sounds next to impossible to me for an animated character to carry a live action show on TV.
But then there's everything else around it, because it's set in a sort of steampunk world with, a sort of Napoleonic twist to it. And it's set in France, of course. So you've got the Eiffel Tower, but you've got airships and you've got people with strange mechanical guns and, all this interesting and intricate technology on top of all that, which is going to be either very expensive set pieces or more CGI. And I just sort of think it's going to end up almost, being like the whole thing's on a green screen.
Yeah.
If that's the only, but I don't. And then there again, you're in the realms of Avatar, which is an amazing film, but equally, that is probably one of the most expensive films ever made.
Yeah.
So how do you do that for TV? It's just baffling.
Let's look at it from a positive point of view, right? We've complained many times in the past about, the procedural cop drama that has, the detective with autism teams up with the sassy New York taxi driver.
Yep.
Blah 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 blah. We've complained so many times about formulaic things that even though it's very difficult to imagine how they can pull it off, we have to be right behind them, right? We have to be cheering them on, because this isn't, nobody's going to accuse this of, treading over old ground and being formulaic.
No, really not. He's a badger and his partner is a rat.
Yeah.
So, you can't really say that's like anything else.
Yeah, so, good luck to you. It's in everybody's best interest if they manage to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, we salute you for trying, at least.
Yeah.
What else have you got?
So I didn't have much more news. Only to say, so on a sad note, it was announced a few days ago, the ripe old age of I think 94. Jerry Pournelle died. So those of you that haven't heard of him, so he's a famous sci-fi author back from the golden age of sci-fi authors, the 1960s and the 1970s, and the work that he's most famous for is The Moat in God's Eye, which is good old-fashioned, space opera with spaceships and aliens and all that sort of stuff. So it's sad to hear him passing. Not a major name nowadays, but I thought, given that one of my favourite sci-fi books is The Moat in God's Eye, it just seemed like a good opportunity to mention the book to people and say, go out and read it.
I've never read it. I might have to hunt that down then.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a real classic, like I say, spaceships and just big space opera writ large. And given the main topic of the show, that's an appropriate thing to bring up as well.
Okay. I've only got one more bit of news. It's not really news, it's something I wanted to raise, is quite often we highlight comic book series that are really, really good or that we really enjoy. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I point out ones to you that are either at the end or have nearly wrapped up, and then you can go back and read them. There's one that's running at the moment that's only going to run for 12 issues, but 2 issues are out at the moment. This is one that I think you should really go back and pick up when it's done, so that you can read it as a complete unit. Mm-hmm. And this is Mr. Miracle from DC Comics.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the character?
No, I haven't.
So he was created as part of the New Gods stuff by Jack Kirby. And Mr. Miracle is a character called Scott Free, who was basically raised on Apokolips in essentially a hell, raised by a character and tortured and Granny Goodness was the kind of the drill master, and her name does not makes her sound nice. She's really not. She's horrific. And it's just this kind of, he became the ultimate escapologist and a superhero and all the rest of it. But you go back to his roots, and he grew up on this death planet. The writer is Tom King, and the art is Mitch Gerards. And Tom King's the writer of Batman at the moment. And I think his boss kind of came to him and said, Batman's doing well. What else would you like to work on? And they decided on this. But Tom King's done some really interesting comics in the past. He's done The Vision, where he did something really, really different with it. He's done Sheriff of Babylon, which was a Vertigo series about a guy in Iraq, based loosely upon his own experiences when he worked for the CIA during the Iraq War. So he does the mainstream superhero stuff, but he also does really interesting stuff. And he's doing it again with Mr. Miracle. Even though it's a guy who has a brightly coloured suit, he's playing with the system, and he's playing with your expectations and what you think is going to happen. And it's really, really interesting. And I think there's like an unreliable narrator. There's clues in there. It's building, and I think I can see some of the moving parts, but I'm not sure yet because there's only two issues in. The artwork's fantastic and really, really detailed. So he said, "This is my Watchmen," jokingly. But I think what he actually means is he's trying to create something that's, 12 issues. It starts as one thing. You think it's going one direction. And when it's done, after 12 issues, that's it. The story is told. But I'm fascinated after 2 issues already.
Brilliant.
So it'll be next year, I suspect, by the time it's collected. But I think you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's cool. I also really like when they take, if you look at, that era of comic books, I guess sort of 50s, the 60s and the 70s. I really like it when they take characters from that era that were kind of like, very colourful and quite campy and, a little bit silly and over the top, and they were 10 they were inventing so many of them. When somebody decides to take that and reinvents it and makes it a little bit more grounded, sort of takes the original concept but just gives it that nudge into modernising it a little bit. So yeah, really interesting.
It's definitely not what you think it is. It's not a guy going out every issue and punching people in the face. It's a mystery. There's something else going on. I don't want to say too much, but you kind of read the issue and put it down, and then you have to go back and read it again. And once you read the second issue, you'll start thinking and pondering and what happened? Is that what I think happened? Or am I seeing what they want me to see? It's one of these things that's going to raise a lot of questions until it gets to the end. And even then, there'll probably still be more questions than answers. But yeah, very good stuff. Highly recommended it. Well done to those 2 guys.
Awesome. So we've got a lot to get through for our main features.
Yes,
so
let's crack on.
Move on.
Welcome back. For our main feature, we're going to talk about 2 brand new sci-fi shows that we've actually spoken about in the recent past. And this is Star Trek Discovery and The Orville from Seth MacFarlane. Now, I think it was last episode or the one before, you and I spoke about our nervousness with Star Trek Discovery, the fact that it looked really good, but we were concerned it wouldn't feel like a Star Trek show, whereas the Orville seemed to have all of the right trappings, and yet it was being advertised as a sort of Galaxy Quest comedy type show. So there again, something a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
We've both watched a few episodes now of both shows, and we're just going to discuss what we think of. So there's going to be spoilers in this. If you have not seen the first 3 or 4 episodes of both shows, then we are going to spoil some of it when we get into detail. So just to let you know.
Okay, so let's start with Star Trek.
Yeah.
So how did you find it?
So, in general, I'm not enjoying it. Now, I'm a long-time Star Trek fan like you, but I've seen some people complaining about some things that even me as a Star Trek fan just make me roll my eyes. Like they go, oh, the Klingons aren't like that, or why have they done this to the ship, or why is the ship so fancy compared to, if it's 10 years before Kirk, blah, blah, blah. Look, they didn't know when they made Star Trek in the 60s originally what it was going to look like in 50 years and all that kind of stuff. And if they made the technology now look even worse than that, it just wouldn't work. So all of that kind of stuff, I don't care about that. I want a ship to look cool. I want interesting races. I don't mind that they've changed the Klingons. I don't mind that they've created some new races we've never seen before that are on the bridge and all this kind of thing. All of that, I don't care. That's cool and it's interesting. Visually, the show is amazing, apart from the kind of lens flares. But structurally, plot, character, I have no idea what the bridge looks like yet because it's always so dark. I can't really tell you what shape it is. There's just so many things that annoy me as a viewer, never mind as a Star Trek fan, that has put me off it. What about yourself?
So, I think... I mean, we've talked about this in the past, that there's so much sci-fi out there nowadays, and it's brilliant. The geeks have won.
Yeah.
But the thing that I've missed for a few years is the sort of show that I really love, which is the out in space, the crew, exploring strange new worlds, new civilizations, boldly going where no man has gone before, all of that sort of stuff. So it's great to see a show, or two new shows that are like that. And I think if Discovery was just called Discovery and it was its own thing and it wasn't a Star Trek show, I think I would be much, much more forgiving of it than I have been whilst watching it. Yeah. So I agree with you that it looks fantastic. I mean, it's so well shot. It looks stunning. I mean, I accept your comments about, the bridge being very dark and things like that, but I think it's a really, really great looking show. The big problem with it is that for me, it's not really Star Trek. And you were saying just before we did this section that Barry and David talked about this, and they don't get why people are saying that. Yeah. So I'm going to justify it from my point of view, I think.
Okay.
Which is that, everybody comes to shows differently. The thing that you like about something might not be the thing that I like about something. But when I think about Star Trek to me is, it's a great sci-fi show, but fundamentally, at its core, it feels like a show about friendship and family. It's always been an ensemble show.
Yes.
It's Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, Scotty, Chekhov, or Picard, Riker, Troy, Data, or
Geordi, Worf,
or Cisco. It's always been an ensemble show.
Yes.
And to me, the thing that speaks to me about Star Trek is this idea of togetherness and friendship and camaraderie and being together, and together we can get over anything, and it's that speaks to me about Star Trek. And the fact that it's all wrapped up in a sci-fi setting and they're on a spaceship just makes it even better. But the thing for me is the team and the ensemble. That's what I love about Star Trek, and it might not be the same for other people, but for me, that's what makes Star Trek Star Trek. And quite early on in the production of it, they made the announcement that this wasn't going to be an ensemble show. I mean, obviously we have other characters in there, but it's really about Michael Burnham, the main character, and everybody else. They don't get much screen time, and the screen time that they do get is when they're talking to Michael Burnham. You don't get, she interacts with all of the other characters, but you don't tend to see the other characters interacting with each other, if you see what I mean. She's on one level and everybody else is on a level below that. And to me, that's the thing that's kind of fundamentally makes it not Star Trek, or doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. And all of the other stuff about, you can argue that, Starfleet is acting sort of fairly immorally in some circumstances. Well, it's 10 years before the original, and we had to get to this utopia some way. So I don't really have a problem with that. Like you say, I'm not a big fan of the Klingons, but I don't mind that they've reinvented them. It's the stumbling point for me is that it doesn't have the ensemble format, and that's why also the main character annoys me slightly, in the sense that if we've had characters like her on Star Trek before.
Yeah.
So the character that she most reminds me of is Ensign Ro from The Next Generation, who was in sort of one season on and off, and then came back in season 7 just for one episode. But she was somebody that was a criminal and had been imprisoned and was on the wrong side of the law, and Picard took her under his wing, and she was argumentative and belligerent and prone to not following orders and things like that. And actually she fitted in really well when you had this team of goody two-shoes. You had somebody that was a little bit rebellious and would upset the apple cart a little bit, and that was great. She fitted in because she was one part of this team that contrasted the team. The problem for me is that if Discovery was like that, she would be a fantastic character. But actually, because it's her that's carrying the show, I find it difficult to warm up to. And that's why, if it wasn't called Star Trek, I'd be eating it up. But it just seems to fundamentally not be the things that I value about Star Trek. And that's where I have a real big problem with it, I think.
I agree. The other thing for me, following on, that is fundamental to me as a Star Trek show, that defines a Star Trek show, is that Star Trek has always pushed the boundaries since the beginning. Now, Gene Roddenberry passed away, and then they made Deep Space Nine, which was a darker show. It was all about war, and then we got Voyager and so on. But he was all about, humans have moved past it. It's a utopia. There's no war and famine, and now, we're looking out to the stars and going outwards. And yes, that's not what they've done in the past with some shows. However, since the beginning, Star Trek has always been about tackling and analysing real life issues in our world in the present day, and using this show as a lens to look at an issue. And even within the more dark shows like Deep Space Nine, they did focus on different issues. So it could be about racism, it could be about gender equality, it could be about war, but it wasn't the only focus. And that is what's missing from this show. They're not tackling any complex or difficult social issues. And the best Star Trek episodes, the ones that really stick out on my mind, are the ones that look at those things. And they work even better because you then have a family of people who have grown over time to trust and love each other and work together to go into something. And sometimes people do die along the way, like Tasha Yar, and her loss was felt by every member of the crew and the TV show and all of the fans because they loved her, and then she was suddenly not there anymore. Whereas if you killed, a bunch of people were killed in the first episode of Discovery. I didn't know them. A guy got sucked out the window. I don't know who he was. I don't really care because I'd had no connection to him. The ship gets blown up in the first episode or second episode, and we lose the captain. I was just warming up to her. She's dead, and all we're left with is this pariah that I don't like, that I don't warm to, and who willingly started a war on purpose, knowing the repercussions after lecturing her own captain about it. And then she went and did it anyway. So when they said they're locking her up in the brig, I thought, well, great, that's it. That's the end of the show then. We'll move on to someone else. And yet they bring her back. So I've got a character that I don't like, and that's the central focus of the show. It's incredibly difficult to warm to.
Yeah, and like I was saying, and that would be fine if there was an ensemble crew to kind of support her, but there isn't. And I found that opening two-parter very, very bizarre because, again, we're not after things that are formulaic. Maybe I am. Maybe that's my problem. But I don't feel like I'm after something that's formulaic. But typically the format of these things is you have the double episode pilot, like Encounter at Farpoint for the Next Generation, where it does two things. It tries to tell an interesting story, but it introduces you to all of the characters, and you get to see who they are. They each have their own little bit. You start to see how they interact, how the crew comes together, and things like that. And we had that for 2 episodes, and then they just blew them all up.
Yep.
And it's like, well, okay, I kind of like some of them. I'm a little bit confused about what we were trying to accomplish by just blowing them all up. It wasn't doing what I kind of feel like a pilot should do from like a show building perspective. Yeah. It was like they introduced me to a whole bunch of people, and there's basically sort of 1.5 of them left, and it's like I don't kind of. That was a very bizarre decision because you haven't really established anything apart from Michael Burnham and the Klingons, who were just as bad as each other as far as I could make out. So it was off to a very strange start, and it almost feels like they've made the decision that we're gonna take Star Trek, and we're gonna sort of try and push it in the direction of 2 different things. We're gonna try and push it a little bit in the direction of J.J. Abrams' movie version of Star Trek, but that was about family and crew and being together and camaraderie and things like that. But in terms of sort of the feel and the look, we're going to sort of push it in that direction a little bit, and then we're going to sort of give it a really strong. We're going to try and give it a really strong nudge in the direction of Battlestar Galactica, with the the Klingons are a little bit like the Cylons. And the Federation's going to be on the back foot, and they're going to be in trouble a lot of the time, and there's going to be conflict, and there's going to be arguments, and there's going to be morally ambiguous characters and things like that. But it unfortunately all falls down because Battlestar Galactica was an ensemble crew where you got to know all of them, and there was the good guys and the bad guys and things like that. So it was kind of it feels like in trying to make the new series of Star Trek a little bit more like Battlestar Galactica, they've failed at it being both Star Trek and at Battlestar Galactica, and kind of Battlestar Galactica did a better job of being Star Trek than this is being.
It's also that thing of maybe the fact that they're surrounding her with a lot of unlikable characters. We're supposed to view her as the lesser evil, and as the show goes on and she saves the day, we're supposed to warm up to her. And there's actually a character it's so annoying, who's supposed to be, 1, the comedy sidekick, and 2, she basically tells the audience what we're supposed to think and feel about the main character. There's the fact that, your reputation is going to have a better reputation. It's going to change now. And it's like, yeah, I can see what you're actually doing. It's just so poor. Like, the main captain on the new ship, plays by Jason Isaacs, who's a fantastic actor, Captain Lorca. He's incredibly dodgy. There's the main guy, the engineer, Lieutenant Stamets, I think, Paul Stamets. He's annoying as anything. He's just such an arrogant, smug git. Doug Jones, bless him, for some reason they've put him. He looks fantastic. The makeup is fantastic as Saru. Doesn't get a lot to do.
No.
Just gets to kind of tell her off a bit and say, "Oh, well, I didn't really trust her." I thought, man, that poor man, he's put into makeup for, 18 hours a day, an extra 2 or 3 hours of makeup, and they give him nothing. I haven't warmed to any of the characters. And then there's the other thing. We're spending a good portion of every episode with the Klingons to see it from their side. Now, there's one thing about the Klingons which does interest me, which was fascinating. They talk about we have to unite the clans so that we won't be assimilated into the Federation. And that was an interesting idea, the fact that you can look at the new Federation who's got 5 or 6 different races, and they're kind of viewing them as the Borg in the way they're sort of saying, look, we don't want to be homogenized and made the same as all of them. We're Klingons, we need to be Klingons. And that was a seed of an idea that then, they used to start the war and all the rest of it, that kind of thing. But my God, can someone please tell them to stop using Klingon, the language?
Funny enough, I watched the most recent episode, which is episode 4, this evening, and the thing that sprang to mind is because it's got to the point where it's overused now, and the thing that sprang to mind is if you watch like a classic World War II movie or something like that.
Yeah.
When you see the Germans having a conversation amongst themselves, they're speaking English. And the convention is, and I know that they're actually speaking German, but it just kind of makes it easier on the audience that if they speak English and we just pretend that they're speaking German, and that's what the Klingons aren't doing. And actually, it also reminded me in Star Trek 6, they do an absolutely brilliant transition where there's a scene where the Klingons are speaking Klingon amongst themselves.
Yeah,
and it gets to a point where they say a word in Klingon that's the same in English as it is in Klingon, and they use that to just sort of seamlessly transition into speaking English, and it really communicates the idea of actually all these people are speaking Klingon still, but it's just going to be easier if we just pretend we can understand what they're saying. And of course we can understand what they're saying because we've got a universal translator anyway.
It's worse than that. I mean, if you look at something like the 13th Warrior, where originally you've got these 12 Nords and a guy from the Far East who can't speak their language, and gradually over a few minutes of the show, over several days, you see him learning the language, and gradually the words filter through until eventually they're speaking English, but we can see that they're not, and he's actually learned their language, and that would work too. What's worse about this, the fact that I even have to say this is going to upset some Star Trek fans. Klingon isn't a real language. They've made it up. But it is the worst thing about it. Because all of these actors, God bless them, have had to learn this phonetically, and it's not a real language, the acting is appalling because they're spending so long learning it phonetically. They've no way of putting emotion. There's no weight in any of the words, apart from occasionally someone's name that turns up.
Yeah.
Or when they all go, Klingons unite, in their own language. And at one point, they did switch to English in the second episode, I think it is, where you suddenly have the main guy, Takuvma, talking in English. And I thought, oh, brilliant, great. And then they go back to talking in Klingon, and it makes no sense. It's a struggle for the actors, also because they've got huge teeth, and the makeup is so heavy that it's really hard for them to emote through anyway.
I think that's the bigger problem, actually, that they just can't have an expression on their face.
No, so there's no expression, there's no emotion, there's no weight to any of their words, and you're forcing the audience to read subtitles for at least a third of every episode, which is annoying the crap out of me and making me loathe the scenes with the Klingons, despite how fantastic they look.
Yeah. So this is going to come surprise, despite everything that I've been saying up until this point. Reeling it back in a bit.
Yeah.
I am enjoying it more than you are. I am kind of into it, but it just isn't Star Trek to me. And that's kind of the disappointing thing. If it was called anything else, I think I'd have a completely different opinion of it. But I'm really struggling with it. I mean, there's no way that I'm not going to continue to watch it, but it's a struggle.
It has all of the trappings of a Star Trek show, and I haven't talked about any of the sort of the fanish things that some people are getting their noses bent out of shape about, because that actually doesn't matter. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. It's all the other things, the poor decisions in the story, the thing that the characters do, all that kind of thing. I just wish, I'm going to watch a few more episodes, but at some point I'm just going to stop, because I want it to improve, but I just don't see it as a Star Trek show at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, I've said this before. If you watch the first episode of Next Generation Season 1, it takes a lot more than 4 episodes for it to get into its stride. So there's hope yet.
Yeah, I agree on that. Absolutely, it takes time. But equally, I can watch the first 2 episodes on that, and I know it's a Star Trek show.
Yeah.
That's the balance. But anyway, so should we move on to the Orville?
Yeah. So this was like you said. This was something that was it's produced and created by Seth MacFarlane. So people know Seth MacFarlane mostly from Family Guy and a bunch of second-rate movies, and it's well known that he's a long-time Star Trek fan. He has a cameo in Star Trek Voyager, a very small cameo in Star Trek Voyager. And now he's doing what was kind of pitched to us in terms of trailers and the way it was originally described was sort of Galaxy Quest, like you said.
Yeah.
The trailer made it really look like it was played for laughs. There was loads and loads of jokes in the trailer. Typical Seth MacFarlane kind of jokes. But then when I started reading interviews with Seth MacFarlane, looking behind it a little bit, it kind of made me think that, well, actually, this trailer has been cut by the studio because they know it's Seth MacFarlane and they're trying to make it look like a comedy. But whenever I've read these interviews with Seth MacFarlane, it was like him trying to do his own take on Star Trek, and he was saying, there's so much negative stuff on TV, and what he remembers about Star Trek is it is something that is full of, brightness and hope for the future and positive messages, and that's what he was trying to do with the Orville, and it made me think, actually maybe there is more to it than it just being Galaxy Quest, and actually. The first 20 minutes of episode 1 of the pilot feels like Galaxy Quest. But actually, as the episodes go on, particularly when we start to hit episode 3, the jokes get further and further apart. And we actually see the show, in my opinion, we see the show that he wants it to be, which is basically his take on classic Star Trek as far as I can see. So how did you find it?
Should say, so this is a 45-minute, an hour-long show in America with adverts. It's not a 30-minute sitcom at all.
No.
It is a Star Trek show with a few kind of off-colour jokes that you would expect from Seth MacFarlane that you'd see in other places. Some of them land for me, some of them don't, I admit. Because I don't watch things like American Dad and Family Guy because it's just not my cup of tea, really. I don't find it amusing. And some of the comedy in this works and some of it doesn't. But beyond that, it has all of the other aspects I would expect from a Star Trek show, which we've talked about on ensemble cast, family, tackling really difficult issues. And I'm absolutely blown away by it, to be honest, especially because I've just watched episode, I think it's 3, is a really heavy and really serious episode, which I have to spoil a little bit to talk about, but I defy anybody to watch the 3rd episode of this show and not be moved by it, which is incredible given that the way it's been pitched, that it's this comedy laugh along Galaxy Quest type show, and it's really not.
And it's so I think you're absolutely 100% right about the humour. I really like Seth MacFarlane's humour. It's not for everybody. The problem with it in this show is it comes at really inappropriate points. I think, like, there's times for comedy, but the points where they drop in some of the jokes are points where a joke really makes no sense at all. So although I like the comedy, the placing of it is a little bit weird to me. But actually, when going back to episode 1. So I'll give you an idea about the jokes in it, and I want to do this to talk about what's great about it, even though it's not a great joke. So Seth MacFarlane, who's the captain Ed Mercer, is meeting his crew for the first time, and he meets Lieutenant Commander Bortus, who you have to imagine as like basically the Klingon of the show. He's basically Worf.
Yes.
And he said, "Oh, Lieutenant Commander Bortus, I understand that your entire species is all male." And Bortus is 100% serious. He goes, "No, that is correct, Captain." He goes, "Oh boy, I bet nobody has to argue about who leaves the toilet seat up." And then he says, "Actually, my species only urinates once per year." And Mercer says, "Oh, that's amazing. I have to get up, 3 or 4 times a night." And that's the jokes. And it's not, you're laughing. I kind of laughed. It's not a great joke.
No, but it's the following when he goes, that's really quite upsetting. And he goes, yeah, it is. Yeah. So that he just points it out that he has to get up 3 or 4 times. Yeah. It's like, that's quite sad. He goes, yeah.
And that's a throwaway dumb joke, right?
Yeah.
And then we hit episode 3, and episode 3 is all about the gender of this species. And it's like you say, it's so touching and it's so serious, and it deals with issues that are like contemporary that we're dealing with as a society at the moment.
Absolutely.
And it's done so well, and it's so nuanced, it's so well acted, and actually that throwaway dumb joke in episode 1 becomes the entire basis for episode 3. And it's done really, really well. And like you say, Star Trek has often been a show that's talked about contemporary issues and has kind of held a mirror up to humanity in its present form. And that does it. That episode 3 does it so well. And not only does it do it in episode 3, they don't just forget about it after that. There's a knock-on effect in detail to what happens in episode 4. And I think it's fantastically well done. I really do.
Yeah, me too. I'm just surprised that. And here's the thing: I've had 4 episodes. I can name all of the cast, all of the people on the crew now. I know a little bit about all of the different characters. I know a lot more about the captain and the first officer. I know a lot about Bortus, who's the sort of second down. I mean, we even get to meet the sort of head of security, who's fascinating, Elara Katan. I really like that character, and I know there's going to be more with her going forward. You see, I'm looking forward to exploring more and finding out more about each of these characters. Some of them are a bit silly, and some of them are a bit annoying, and they're there to lighten the mood at times, but that works. It just works because you have the balance. You have the balance of the serious characters, the annoying characters, the ones that are in detail, the ones that are touched on a little.
I mean, Elara Katan is a brilliant example because she's she's Zalayan, and this race they live on a really high gravity planet.
Yeah.
So she has incredible strength. So she's like super, super strong, and very, very few people from her planet leave.
Yes.
So she's incredibly strong, and she gets fast-track promotion because she's very rare within their version of the Federation. and so she's now the chief of security. But she's incredibly young to have that role. She's only 23, and in episode 4, not too much of a spoiler. In episode 4, she ends up being thrust in. Or is it episode 2?
I think it's 4.
Episode 4, she ends up being thrust into a position where she has to be in command because of what else is happening, and she's ill prepared for it, and people don't quite trust her, and she makes decisions that the rest of the crew don't agree with, and it looks like they're going to mutiny, and she has all of this conflict between doing the right thing in terms of being an officer and actually doing the right thing for her friends, and it's all about how she handles that conflict, and it's like amazing.
No, it's episode 2, because she goes to call on Bortus, and Bortus can't help her because he has to incubate his egg. Yeah. So he sat on his egg for 21 days. Like, look, you've got to deal with this. I'm on the ship, but I can't help you. So you have to. And the other interesting thing is they play a lot. So in episode 3, they explore gender very much because of the stuff with Bortus. But in this second episode, and also throughout the show, the character of Alara, the actress, Holston Sage, probably mispronouncing her name, she's quite a petite woman. She's probably like 5'2", 5'4" or something. And a lot of the actors are a lot taller, including Adrian Palicki, who's the XO. She's quite a tall woman. She's probably like 5'10" or 6 foot with heels. So you've got this incredibly small woman, alien, who's incredibly strong. And there's a few times where the captain tries to do something and he just can't, and he knows he can't do it. And he just turns to Alara and says, "Do you want to open this can of pickles for me?" Yeah. Because he knows she can. And he'll play off the joke and sort of say, "I loosened it for you." But blatantly he knows, and we know, that he couldn't have done it. And she's... So there's things like that without them saying, "Oh, you're going to change how you look at her now, aren't you? Yes. Isn't she strong? Which is so on-the-nose dialogue from Discovery. It's lazy. Whereas this, they just do stuff and breeze past it, and you take it in. They don't signpost it and bang you over the head about it.
And there's a really, really nice... So I've just finished watching episode 5. There's a really, really nice bit in episode 5 where she's basically turning over somebody's apartment, and she lifts the bed. She lifts up the bed to look underneath it, and she lifts it up like it's a piece of paper. But they don't signpost it. They don't make a big fuss about it. But actually, and it could have been that they could have just got the actress to kind of lift it up, and it would have looked really heavy. But they've rigged it in such a way that it's being held up for her, so that it appears that she's lifting it up as if it's just nothing. But it's not mentioned. It's not signposted. It's not drawn attention to. But it's just this really nice little touch that just goes to show that there's lots and lots of thought that's been put into it, and it's slightly inappropriate humour aside. And when I say inappropriate, I don't mean like crazy rude. I mean just in weird locations some of the time. That aside, he's nailed what Star Trek is about.
Absolutely, yeah. It works incredibly well. They're building something as well. I mean, it's not to say that there isn't conflict in the show. There's a race called the Kree. No, that's not the Kree.
The Krill.
Krill, yes, and they're the sort of villains, as it were, that keep cropping up. But equally, they come into contact with other races that aren't nearly as nice. So it's not all peace and love all of the time. There's action as well. It's not just a sitcom set on a spaceship for an hour. There's stuff going on. It's really a drama with some comedy, I would say, at times. But it just works incredibly well. And I'm having to remind myself that I've only been watching about 4 or 5 episodes because I'm engaged with everybody in a way that I'm not on other shows.
Like you say, like you say, sorry to interrupt, but like you say, with 5 episodes in, I know the name of every single one of them. I know their backstory. I know where they're from. I know how they relate to each other. Like going back to episode 2, there's it's really nice between Alara and the Doctor.
Yeah,
the Doctor is her confidant and is sort of giving her advice in the background, like McCoy would have done.
Yes,
and it's just. I just feel like I know them. And it's
like there's funny bits, like there's an alien on the ship that's like a lump of slime,
Yeah.
and he keeps trying to chat up the Doctor and take her out on a date, and she's like, look, I'm not interested. And he's like, oh, it's okay, it's okay. And later on, they'll be trying again, and there's just little things like that that they touch on, and that would be tagged on the end of another scene that's moving the plot on, and yet you get more because it's a bit about the character and someone else on the ship, or there's they're trying to teach the AI character about a practical joke. That goes horribly wrong, but then we get to see how that character reacts to it and the payoff, and that ties into the main plot later on. So there's, everything's done and it's been built really carefully and really well. It almost feels like he's been thinking about this for a long time, and he planned this out way in advance, and he's written it in such a way that every episode builds. I mean, can you name the Doctor in Discovery?
No. I can barely name any of them in Discovery.
The engineer, the spore engineer guy who, I can name Lorcas and I can name Michael Burnham. Commander, then there's the commander who's like the head of security. I can't remember her name now. And Saru, but that's it. Oh, and the annoying girl Tilly, who I just want to smother with a pillow. She's just there for comedy effect, and it doesn't work.
And we've talked about what's on screen. Let's talk about behind the scenes a little bit. So, first 5 episodes. Episode 1 directed by Jon Favreau. From Iron Man. Episode 2 directed by Robert Duncan McNeil, who was Tom Paris in Star Trek Voyager.
Yes.
And then who became a TV director. Episode 3 directed by Brannon Braga, who is executive producer of Star Trek The Next Generation. Episode 4 directed by James L. Conway, who's a director on The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, the whole shebang. Episode 5, which is the most recent one out, directed by Jonathan Frakes, Will Riker himself.
Yes.
So he's not just doing his own Star Trek show. It's produced by Brannon Braga as well, David A. Goodman. He's assembled a team that knows what classic Star Trek is.
Yeah. And some of the actors they're getting, all the main cast is fantastic. But they're getting a lot of big named cameos that come in to do an episode. I'm sure it's because of the connections to Seth MacFarlane, because he has such a good reputation within the business, but they're still getting some really big named Hollywood A-list actors.
Yeah, so to name a few, so Charlize Theron we've had, Liam Neeson we've had.
Yeah.
And
there's our favourite captain who's going to be in it as well, apparently.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
Patrick Stewart himself will be in an episode, which is mind-boggling. Yeah. So I just, the enthusiasm I have for this show compared to Discovery is complete. They're just two opposite ends of the spectrum. They really are. I admit, some people who aren't fans of Star Trek before may watch this and like it, because may like Discovery because it's dark and gritty and full of conflict and grey characters and all that kind of stuff. But it just wearies. I'm just weary when I watch it. I just feel like I'm struggling to get through to the end of 44 minutes and say, is it over yet? Whereas I never want an episode of the Orville to end. I just want, it's a little bit more.
You know what? And I think there's a part of it that, since we are called Grouchy Old Geeks, I think possibly a part of it is that actually the Orville is, by today's standards, quite an old-fashioned TV show, in the sense that it really is quite episodic, and it is trying to be old-style Star Trek, whereas Discovery is trying to be sort of much more up-to-date and modern, and that's absolutely fine. And it's great that those two different things exist for different people to like different things. But I think in terms of how a show is making me feel, watching the Orville, it takes me back to when The Next Generation first came out, and I'm just enjoying every minute of it, and I love the characters. I love following along with them. It's just great. just great.
Absolutely, I agree. I really look forward to seeing it every week and to seeing where it goes next. And I hope that it gets picked up for a second season very soon, because it's just such fun.
Yeah,
and yeah, I'll watch a few more Discovery, but if it continues as it is, it's just really not a show for me, and it's not a Star Trek show that I want to keep watching.
Yeah, I'm going to continue with both of them, but I really hope Orville goes from strength to strength. It's interesting that Discovery has had really good critical reviews, but not so much a positive audience reaction, whereas the Orville has had like terrible critical reviews, but audiences really seem to love it. So it's interesting to see how that's turned out. But I'm really hoping that the Orville not only continues to be as good as it is, but gets more seasons, because I would just love to see as much of it as they can possibly pump out.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's I think it's only 13 episodes of the first season.
Yeah.
So they're keeping it nice and short as well. They're not going to do like the 22 or 24 episode thing. And I know Discovery's quite short as well. Is it 10 episodes or 12?
It's a bit more confusing than that, because I think they're doing a short number of episodes and then having a hiatus for a few months.
Yes, we get some until November. Then there's a break for Christmas, and then it comes back in January, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of it's not very episodic, but I think it's almost sort of two different storylines. I'm a little bit unclear. Yeah, I guess we'll find out if we continue to.
But it's a shorter season as well. They're not doing the full run either. So I guess they're testing the water with both. And we'll see how it goes. But I think you'll have to tell me how it continues. And it's
right.
The good news is there's so much else out there to watch. I'm not going to be short of anything else to watch, TV wise. So you can tell me if it continues in the same vein.
So I have a feeling, as we're drawing this episode to a close, that this could be a controversial one.
Well, I think we've been very clear about what we like and don't. And why we don't like it, and what constitutes a Star Trek show in our view, and what does not. So
we'd be interested to hear your thoughts, both of what you think about what we've said and what you think about Discovery, and I think especially what you think about Orville, because I think it's a show that I think has been missold, and it's great. So if you watched it, let us know what you think. Good and bad, because I for one am really curious to find out.
Absolutely. So come on to the Facebook group, look for Grouchy Old Geeks. We're on there. You can email the show, grouchyoldgeeks@gmail.com. Go on to geeksyndicate.co.uk to support this show and all of the other shows on the network, and also support Geek Syndicate on Patreon. There are a number of different options on there. Barry's recently added some other levels on there, so it's patreon.com/Geek Syndicate. So that's it for October. We'll be back next month, where we're going to talk about Blade Runner and the sequel and see how it holds up.
Yeah.
Oof, nervous but excited. Yeah.
That's a perfect description for it. Yeah.
Okay. In the meantime, it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.